You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. PM Eastern Time on the US East Coast this evening, the 3rd of September, Tuesday. This storm has been going on for more than a week and it's been around these islands for several days. It is still in the vicinity, pushing towards the north, delivering tropical storm force winds to the Florida East Coast. The National Hurricane Center describes it as lashing the Florida East Coast at this time. Winds of 110 miles per hour, pressure of 959 millibars, stage 5 on the CDPS for its potential landfall later in North Carolina. Not much has changed in terms of the storm's intensity at this time, but its structure and its appearance is gradually deviating from what we've been seeing of it recently. To talk about it in this hour with me, my name's Nathan Foy. I'm joined by Ryan, Isaac and Thomas for this hour of coverage. How are you this evening?
I'm doing very, very well, Nathan, this evening. I am relieved to see that Dorian continues to weaken faster than the NHC expected it and faster than I expected it to. I hope that trend does continue, and it looks like the western side of things in particular has really started to take a nosedive when it comes to its structure recently. So that's definitely good news for people in the path of Dorian, as it looks like it may be continuing to weaken faster than expected.
We'll get into the details of that shortly as we take a look at that cone and the warnings on your map there. A reminder of the warnings: nothing has changed at 8 p.m, but to remind you of these, a storm surge warning from Jupiter Inlet to Surf City, North Carolina. That's a large area under a storm surge warning. A storm surge watch for north of Surf City to Duck, North Carolina, the Pamlico and Albemarle Sounds. And I can't remember how it was pronounced from last time. We did this last time. I think it's the Neuse River and Pamlico.
Yeah, I think it's pronounced. It's either I think it's news or news. One of the two.
No idea.
Can't remember.
We covered it during Florence and forgotten. A hurricane warning for Sebastian Inlet to Ponte Verde Beach. I can't even do this tonight. Sebastian Inlet to Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, north of Savannah River to Surf City, North Carolina. This storm's been going on for so long, taking a toll on everyone involved here. Our coming into our fifth straight day of continuous coverage. A hurricane watch for north of Ponte Vedra Beach to Savannah River, north of Surf City, North Carolina to the Virginia border, and the Albemarle and Pamlico Sounds. A tropical storm warning for Grand Bahama and the Abacos Islands, still I'm afraid, in the northwestern Bahamas, north of Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida to Savannah River, and Jupiter Inlet to Sebastian Inlet, Florida. A tropical storm watch for the North Carolina-Virginia border to Chincoteague, I think it is, in Virginia, and Chesapeake Bay from Smith Point southward. So those are all the warnings that are currently in effect. They're expecting in terms of storm surge, Savannah River to Cape Lookout 4 to 7 feet, Volusia Brevard County line to Savannah River 3 to 5 feet, Cape Lookout to Duck, North Carolina 3 to 5 feet, Jupiter Inlet to Volusia Brevard County line, Florida 2 to 4 feet. In terms of rainfall, expecting in the northwestern Bahamas an additional 1 to 3 inches. Isolated storm totals over 30 inches, they're now saying. Interesting change in the wording there, from up to over 30 inches. Coastal Carolinas, 5 to 10 inches, isolated 15. Atlantic coast, from the Florida Peninsula north of West Palm Beach through Georgia and across southeast Virginia, 3 to 6 inches. This rainfall may cause life-threatening flash floods. A tornado or two are also possible near the immediate east coast of Florida during the next several hours. This risk will shift to along the immediate coasts of Georgia and the Carolinas on Wednesday into Thursday. I don't know if there are any warnings related to that out there right now. It doesn't look like there's anything currently underway. There are some special marine warnings off the coast of South Florida, just off Homestead, and also just off Boca Raton in Florida as well. Flood warnings further north. We're not looking at anything tornado related at the minute, but again, that is a possibility later today. Thomas, what are we seeing on the ground? Any significant storms that aren't quite at that severe threshold yet?
Not really at the moment. Any storms that would be overly significant on the outer bands of Dorian heading into. As we can see, there is a rain band that is headed into Florida that could be significant in rainfall, maybe even some lightning, but it looks like gusty winds and large hail are not overly likely that are associated with those storms specifically. All gusty winds that you would be feeling would probably be from the storm directly, would be from Dorian, as it looks like, at least on the graphic that I'm showing right now, those tropical storm force winds are onshore.
How would you, in summary, what type of area we're looking at for those tropical storm force winds right now?
You can see the blue area there. That's the NHC's official tropical storm force wind field. So you can see, for example, Daytona Beach, probably going to be getting those relatively soon. Palm Bay, also relatively close to that. Miami, just outside of there, but places like West Palm Beach are within this wind field. So definitely, this is something.
All these places.
Yeah, so it's definitely still of concern. Hopefully people have prepared for tropical storm conditions as this storm does continue to move along the United States coast.
Still a little bit of good news. It does appear to be moving around still about 18 miles east of the National Hurricane Center's last forecast. Are you seeing the same thing here?
Yeah, I'm seeing it on both satellite and radar. The storm is continuing to move east of forecast and has been doing so for a while.
Yep.
The NHC has been hinting at this westward jog that this storm would take, and it's not impossible to do so, especially when the trough begins to pick it up and a weakness forms. We could see a slight westward shift before it goes, but I don't think it'll be quite as dramatic as what the NHC is saying anymore.
It is getting a bit far-fetched, that forecast. As we look at it, though, still we're seeing movement north-northwest, roughly 330 degrees on the compass, which is pretty much in that bracket. Movement right now about 8 miles per hour. Obviously we expect it to speed up, but at least now we've got definitive evidence that it is speeding up and we don't have this nightmare that we've been having for the previous 2 days.
It is very good news, too.
What we're also seeing on the latest satellite imagery, Thomas, is that convection, which has been blowing up on the south side recently, is waning a lot, and now there really is no dark red on the satellite imagery at all, which I think is the first time that's happened.
Yeah, especially since it's gotten to major status. This is the first time that it has happened. And I think it's just further indication of the weakening that the storm is going through. I think the storm is going to continue to weaken for a while. The only thing that I can say the storm has done better on lately is just it looks better in appearance when it comes to the eye itself. The eye looks a bit better now, but convection is definitely waning, and that western side looks very decrepit at the moment. So at least in my opinion, the storm is continuing to weaken, although it does have the opportunity to strengthen at least a little bit as it heads north here. So we'll see as it moves into warmer sea surface temperatures if it's able to take advantage of those, or if the structure is so messed up that it's still trying to recover from that.
Here's a little bit of a wider shot now that the storm is increasing in size, so we're zoning out a little bit on the imagery, and you can see there the storm in relation to Florida as a whole state. And definitely compared to this morning, the bands were sort of just holding out off the shore, weren't they? But a big flare-up pushed through earlier today, and in the last couple of hours particularly, we're seeing a lot more banding over land.
Yeah, that's true, and that's mostly because as the storm moves northward, it's going to fan out. Convection probably won't be as strong as it was. The storm overall won't be, but its pressure may actually hold for a while as it fans out and gets larger with time. So we'll see what happens there, but definitely a interesting and still concerning situation nonetheless.
All right, well, we will be taking questions, so start your message with Force 13 all in text. If you're watching us on YouTube, in the chat section, it will light up big and bright for us if you do mention us, so that's a good idea if you want your question answered. I did see one earlier about whether we think there is still an opportunity for re-intensification to any degree.
I certainly think it's possible.
Definitely.
Although I'm not sure if it will happen. Maybe like some slight re-strengthening, but
I thought it was happening earlier today.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be like really dramatic, I guess. I think maybe only like a 5-10 mile per hour increase, but that's probably about it.
It's looking that way. I did worry at first because about 4 or 5 hours ago, I was looking at the imagery, the eye temperatures were on the increase again. There was some blowing up around. It was looking like it was getting itself more organized again. But since then, the convection is in the process of fizzling. So I don't think we're in danger of seeing this going back to Category 3 tonight. But the models are indicating that there is a decent opportunity for a bit of re-intensification tomorrow.
Yeah, especially around tomorrow evening. That's probably going to be its best shot at really re-intensifying. Its structure, believe it or not, Nathan, at least looking at radar and looking even at satellite now that I think about it, is honestly improving. While the western eye wall convection has waned, the eye's appearance overall looks better. And while convection has waned, the structure of the storm looks like it is getting better in appearance. It looks like it's gradually getting its act back together. And at least on the radar near Florida, it looks like also this thing is finishing an eye wall replacement cycle right now. And shortly after that is done, this eye will probably really have an opportunity to shine through, and this may have an opportunity for some gradual strengthening. Rapid intensification is very unlikely, especially with how large the storm is now compared to how big it once was. This is starting to become on the larger side of storms, unlike where it was just a day or two ago.
Saw some questions earlier. I'll try and start at the beginning. What impacts could coastal Virginia see? Well, there it is, under a tropical storm watch.
Yeah, they are under a tropical storm watch. They are within the cone. I mean, Virginia could definitely get some impacts from this. Heavy rainfall is almost a given. As this moves northward, it will expand. Virginia is nearly certain to get impacts, in my opinion, of at least rainfall. Tropical storm force winds aren't out of the question. I think hurricane force winds are relatively unlikely, as if the center were to get very close to Virginia, it would have to go over North Carolina first. Yeah. Steering will not allow it to go around North Carolina and then get closer to Virginia. So I don't think hurricane conditions are something that's going to need to be worried about by the people in Virginia really at all. But tropical storm force winds and very heavy rainfall are still possibilities with this as it does move north.
And from the North Carolina coast all the way up the east coast from there, really, there are a lot of estuaries and river outlets. And I imagine storm surge will be an issue along a lot of those areas.
Yeah, it will be, especially for the lower lying areas, coastal areas especially. Coastal flooding, I did not mention it, but that'll probably be an issue for most of the United States East Coast as this storm moves northward. And especially, again, as it gets larger, this is a common theme. The threat for coastal flooding will become bigger as the storm expands.
Yes. Isaac, you're also with us tonight. What are your latest thoughts on the storm today?
Well, it's definitely looking disabled. Than it did last night. It's looking a bit worse. However, if it does complete that western side of the eye there and get be able to complete that eye rather, so I should say, once it does that, it'll probably it could potentially strengthen to a category 3 again. It's not completely off the cards yet. It's possible. Depends if it decides to fix itself before it nears the Carolinas or not. Whether that completes or not, the one field for Hurricane Dorian has expanded quite significantly compared to about 2 days ago. So whether or not it does not make it a landfall in the Carolinas doesn't matter because they'll still get some rain, flooding, and probably some storm surge and gusty wind impacts from Hurricane Dorian as it either passes along or potentially makes landfall along the Carolinas.
What time will the winds and rain leave the Orlando area tomorrow? That's another question that I received there.
Good question. Well, if we look at Thomas's radar there, looks like Orlando's just starting to just starting to feel that rain band. So
I would say we're talking late afternoon.
yeah, that'd be my guess too.
Looking at that radar again, you can see there bands moving in, swirling around, obviously. General path of some of these potential thunderstorms from the north to south and then bending round towards the southeast as the storm passes by. Basically all along Interstate 4 there, because earlier there was a stray band that also struck Lakeland as well. But it looks like Orlando might be getting some pretty heavy stuff right now, Thomas.
Yeah, it's looking like a near certainty, especially since radar is about 2 to 4 minutes behind. So at this point, they're probably getting very heavy rain in the city of Orlando, and that heavy rain can be expected to really continue throughout the next 24 hours-ish, I would say, before the storm does move out and does not really have as much of an impact anymore. So I'd say they still got about a day's worth of Dorian left to go before things do start to.
Yeah, now something that's always been, something that is now under the microscope really, is whether the Gulf Stream will aid the storm and by how much. How much of an impact do you guys think that will have? Anyone?
What, I'm sorry?
The Gulf Stream. How much impact do you think that will have?
I think it's honestly going to be significant, as that's probably one of the warmest bands of water in the Atlantic Ocean that stretches as far north as it does, and this is probably going to follow it. I think that's really the main reason it has a chance of re-intensification at this point in time. So I think that it definitely does have an impact. How much of an impact it has, I am not 100% sure, but it's definitely going to help the storm out, especially with the redevelopment of the western side. So that's really going to be helpful for it. Wind shear is increasing, so that's not so helpful for it. But the anticyclone over the storm right now is going to probably help it out with shear as well. So it's got a better chance, in my opinion, of re-intensification than we thought it would at this point.
So we've got people inquiring about conditions on Palm Beach. Would they be improving by now? They should be, shouldn't they?
I would imagine.
Where is Palm Beach?
Palm Beach, further south.
Let's have a look.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah,
they're
their
almost
conditions
out.
are improving
Yeah,
significantly.
Nearly there.
All right, I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure.
yeah,
Nearly there, Ryan.
yeah. They're almost out of the storm, or at least the rain part. It
The
does
amount of
look like
times
they're
we've
still gonna.
mentioned that area on our streams, because for so long the storm, when it was stalling, it was on the same latitude as West Palm Beach. Um, it was just so many people were thinking that it would just continue going west. At some points, even we were thinking, yep, that might happen. And we certainly warned of that possibility. Thankfully, that hasn't happened. It could still drift west, but Florida is out of the cone, so the landfall of this storm most likely won't be in Florida. Almost certain. We did also have a question about the Jacksonville area and St. Augustine. Obviously, under that storm surge warning and a hurricane warning. I'm still not convinced personally that hurricane force winds will happen along the coast. The storm would still need to track a bit further towards the west. Now that could still happen, but the trend that we're seeing at the moment is that it isn't. It is expanding. So tropical storm force winds, possibly even high-end tropical storm force winds, could occur anywhere along that coastline under the tropical storm and hurricane warnings. But I don't think they're going to get full-on hurricane conditions unless the storm does now push towards the western side of that National Hurricane Center cone, which at the moment it's not doing. So I guess we'll keep you updated on that. I believe we're also joined now by Orlando, not the city.
Yes.
And what's your analysis of the storm as we see it at this moment?
Well, right now it's interesting to watch. Of course, the Florida coast is really beginning to see impacts, and as it's moving away from Florida now. I mean, not Florida, the Bahamas. Damn, that was bad. But yeah, it's still very powerful, although it's weakened quite significantly from its peak, which was 185 miles per hour. So it's
we're trying to
honestly
erase that from our memories.
It's honestly going to be a wait and see what the storm does. Maybe it could intensify a little more. But yeah, I think it's still going to bring impacts to the United States. But I think the worst part of it, what it's done to Bahamas, now that it's coming to a close finally. We're waiting to see.
Do we know whether the National Hurricane Center will continue doing hourly updates? I assume they will here.
Yeah, they probably will. I mean, I don't know. Probably for the next couple of days, I would imagine.
Perhaps. And then when we get to, well, obviously the next hour, hopefully there'll be an update from them, 9 p.m. Their next full advisory will be at 11 p.m. and we will carry that update here. I'm not sure whether we're going to be live with commentary at that point or not, or whether we will just run an update video like we do in the mornings, because this event is unraveling at this stage, just like the storm's eye wall, it would appear. But signs of recovery in those latest frames, I mean, you know, as we always say with this very rapid GOES 16 imagery, we can't make any knee-jerk reactions, but we can only report on what we see. Eye wall coming in and out. Overall, do you think that western eye wall is just done for good?
It all depends. The storm still has enough time to get its act together, but hopefully it doesn't recover.
I don't think that eye wall is done. I think it's still got a ways to go, especially with the latest frames. I think that it's, especially since it's heading into more favorable conditions with time, for at least gradual re-strengthening. I think that from a structure standpoint, it could improve significantly. So we'll see what happens, but I think that it's moving into conditions that are going to be quite a bit better for improvement of especially that western eye wall as it's moving into warmer water.
Yeah, that's honestly a concern that is very real at the moment, but how much will it recover? It's remaining uncertain, to say the least. Beyond that, though, it's still going to bring impacts to the Carolinas, and as it's already bringing impacts to the Florida coast. Thankfully, it's weakened for them, but when it comes to the Carolinas, that's still potential for it perhaps be just slightly stronger, depending what the storm decides to do. If it decides to end up reorganizing just a bit to bring up more of a threat.
So let me just get a latest distance from certain places along the Florida coast. Well, I guess the main point right now is that the storm is 103 miles from Vero Beach, and that is probably the closest place to the storm right now in Florida. Actually, very close to being the closest place anywhere, because it is 98 miles from Grand Bahama. So Vero Beach, 102, 103 miles away from the center of the storm's eye. So anywhere south of there, conditions will be getting better. Anywhere north of Vero Beach right now, conditions could possibly get worse. I mean, the initial point, Vero Beach to Cape Canaveral, it could get worse. No guarantee that it will, but it still could at this point, and definitely heed the warnings. And don't venture out, especially along the coastal regions. And then further north, Daytona Beach, Palm Coast, St. Augustine, Jacksonville, the worst of this storm is yet to come. And it might not be the winds, and it might not even be the rains. If the storm stays quite a bit offshore, we're still looking at significant amounts of storm surge that could reach 7 feet. So that is one of the main threats from this storm, and one of the things that really catch people out, and one of the things we always warn people about, but it's just an ingrained thing quite often, where we always end up focusing on the winds more than anything else, because I guess that is what we're just drawn to, what is the most easiest to evaluate, I suppose. But that storm surge is definitely there, and is impacting the coast at this time, and will further impact the coast further north tonight, into tomorrow, into Wednesday night as we reach the northern part of Florida, into Thursday as you get towards south and North Carolina. That was a screen there, interestingly enough. I think Isaac's getting some imagery prepared, and as we go back to the water vapor imagery, there again you can see the process that has occurred in the last few hours. The storm's eye, still rather clear, incredibly ragged at this time, but the west and the southwest, you can see looking incredibly frail in those last frames.
Yeah, I'm starting to see this wrapping around of convection on the western side, and the weaker convection now on the southwestern side. So that could, in short order, move into the pool of stronger convection as the other convection wraps around. And if that does occur, the eye wall will definitely be in better shape. It still won't be in perfect shape, and I still don't think that it's enough to cause significant intensification, but it definitely means that it could maintain its strength longer as it moves north.
Alright, well, let's point you to elsewhere now and show you what's going on around the world. Well, first of all, we'll show you more imagery of Dorian. The imagery's up to date. The intensity at the bar at the bottom is not right. That was a long time ago. It was 145 miles an hour. It's now 110 miles an hour and a pressure of 959 millibars. But the imagery there is up to date, and you can see how the storm's been progressing both on the geocolor imagery, water vapor at the top right, and one of the enhanced infrared channels on the bottom right hand side. Then there's another panel with the RGB air mass, which is sort of a form of water vapor imagery really, as you look at the screen there. Again, usually shows most clearly differences and changes in the eye and eye wall structure when it's coming and going, and some other channels on the right hand side. Hurricane Juliet is a very strong storm right now. It's much more than the wind speed at the bottom again. It is 125 miles per hour, which is just short of Category 4 status. although it looks like the eye is clouding up and possibly breaking up in those later frames. Yep, looks like that's starting to struggle. It's going to lose intensity now. We have reached its peak, and that is not going to get to Category 4 status. 14W still hasn't been named by the Japanese Meteorological Agency in the Western Pacific. It is still partially exposed, and visible imagery over it now. Very decent convection blowing over it on the eastern and southern side. Still a minimal tropical storm. 16W was named Kajiki, and that is lingering along the coast of Vietnam. Ling Ling is a developing typhoon. We have it now as a high-end Category 1. That's what we're going with, aren't we, Thomas? We consulted on this together. 90 mile per hour winds estimated by our satellite technique. And that one could be a major typhoon as it enters the East China Sea and ventures towards the Korean Peninsula. This is Invest 93, which is still extant right now, not far from Yap. And Invest 94, which apparently is the same as Kajiki. That is really confusing. I have no idea what's going on with that. There is a recent Navy image of Dorian, just for another perspective. And that quite well shows quite well the size of the storm, with some sort of bands, but sort of ghost bands really, reaching the Carolina coast already. There won't be much going on in those bands. But there could be some rainfall. This is the latest track forecast map from the National Hurricane Center, and to read out the warnings right now, just to remind you of them. Storm surge warning for Jupiter Inlet to Surf City, North Carolina. A storm surge watch north of Surf City to Duck, North Carolina. Pamlico and Albemarle Sounds, Neuse and Pamlico Rivers. A hurricane warning for Sebastian Inlet to Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, north of Savannah River to Surf City, North Carolina. Hurricane watch north of Ponte Vedra Beach to Savannah River and north of Surf City to the North Carolina-Virginia border and the Albemarle and Pamlico Sounds. Tropical storm warning for Grand Bahama and the Abacos Islands, still in northwestern Bahamas, north of Ponte Vedra Beach to Savannah River and Jupiter Inlet to Sebastian Inlet. A tropical storm watch for the North Carolina-Virginia border to Chincoteague, Virginia, and Chesapeake Bay from Smith Point southwards. You can see on the forecast track there, National Hurricane Center narrowly has the storm avoiding a landfall in North Carolina. That will be on Thursday evening. Hurricane force winds possible anywhere within that hurricane warning area, and the center of the storm's eye could make landfall anywhere within that cone. And that means tropical storm force winds and hurricane force winds could still occur outside of that cone entirely. So don't read too much into that cone. Also worth noting that the current size of tropical storm force winds marked in orange around the center there is larger than the cone of uncertainty for day 3. So that tells you quite a lot about the uncertainty for tropical storm force winds. Latest tropical storm force wind speed probabilities might help you out a bit there. Very high chances along the coast, pretty much up to North Carolina, all the coastal regions there. Very high chance of tropical storm force winds, and anyone in Atlantic Canada watching out there as well. Nova Scotia way up above 50% chance now, and the same too for Newfoundland. It could be a dangerous still hurricane strength, either actually hurricane or extratropical cyclone by the time it gets up there. Also, you can see 2 other areas there on the bottom left hand side near Mexico. That is Tropical Storm Fernand, which is going to make landfall there. It's a 50 mile an hour tropical storm at this time. And on the right hand side is the wind speed probabilities for Tropical Depression 8, which has formed near the coast of Africa, near the Cape Verde Islands. That one could become our next named storm very soon. You'll see them shortly. We'll bring you back to the key messages a little later if we get the time. That was an earlier model run. We'll get an updated one for you shortly. You'll notice here from the rainfall estimates from the National Hurricane Center that those estimates are going down. Initially we were looking at maybe 11 inches for parts of North Carolina. We're now down to about 8 or 9 inches there. And nowhere is expecting 10 inches anymore on this graphic at least. Florida, 4 to 6 inches along the coast there from north of Cape Canaveral pretty much up to the Jacksonville area. And there's the wide view of what's going on in the Atlantic right now. The 3 tropical cyclones of differing intensities. You get one of everything here. Hurricane Dorian, Tropical Storm Fernand, and Tropical Depression 8. Just to read out the warning for Fernand, there are tropical storm warnings in effect for the coast of Mexico. Puerto Altamira to the mouth of the Rio Grande River under a tropical storm warning at this time. Tropical Depression 8 on the right hand side, and another area of interest that could develop in the next 5 days, marked number 1, and that has a 50% chance. Also not on this graphic is another area of interest that is still over Africa that has a 70% chance of formation in the next 5 days, and long-range models are blowing that up to become potentially a major hurricane, Cape Verde origin, and that is one of the more fearsome ones, and remains to be seen whether that one will remain out at sea or not. That will be something we'll be tracking for days on end, and that is something, if it did strike the western part of the Atlantic anywhere, it won't happen until at least next week. In the Eastern Pacific there's Juliet, and over in the Western Pacific again those systems are wide shot. And that's everything around the world. Let's bring us now back to the latest on Dorian with Thomas's radar.
Yeah, so not much has changed since last time we looked at it. Still, it looks like the western side, at least to me, looks more robust on radar than it does on satellite. I think that just might be due to the outer bands that are heading onto Florida, and I think that also just might be because it is at higher levels. I don't know, but still, either way, tropical storm force winds are now ashore on Florida. That's obvious with what radar is showing. Also the wind field that is on the screen, which is the NHC's estimate. So you can see that lighter green on the coast. Those are 40 mile per hour or greater winds. You can see the dark green, which is just off the coast. That is 60 mile per hour or greater winds. And then you can see the 75 mile per hour and greater winds in the yellow area. So that's all the wind fields at the moment. And it looks like those 60 mile an hour winds aren't that far offshore.
Not very far at all. We're now also joined by Devon. Good evening to you.
Yes, good evening.
Your thoughts on the storm today? Its structure sort of has improved a little bit, or has it?
Well, it has an eye now, and it didn't have an eye this morning. So I would consider that a structural improvement. I don't know about anyone else.
Convection
This
waning,
storm
though?
will probably either maintain or gain a little bit of intensity as it continues to move northward. The quicker it moves away from the Bahamas, the better. Honestly, just get it away from the Bahamas now, please. So yeah, the storm will continue to move northward, scrape by the Carolinas, likely produce some pretty significant storm surge in South and North Carolina, especially in North Carolina.
Massive dry slots on the western side right now, from satellite depictions.
That's what it looks like, but hey, this storm's going back over warm water, so that's the thing that's worrying me the most right now is
it's always
how
at the
much
back
will
of
the
our
storm
minds.
potentially re-intensify.
Always at the back of our minds, but the first sign of that surely would be new blow-ups in convective cloud tops, and we're not seeing that yet.
Luckily not. I would figure that the eye would probably get structurally better first, and then we would see the convection blow-ups, but
Here's
either
the
which
thing.
way,
Well, given how it's...
either which
I'm
way,
sorry, you go ahead.
go ahead.
Okay, turn taking here. Increasing in size, obviously, as we know. The cloud coverage increasing in size as well. Am I right in saying that just the fact that the clouds are blocking the sun during the day reduces those sea surface temperatures just a little bit already?
Yeah, it would, but diurnal heating has so little to do with the sea surface temperatures that I really don't think that it's matters to that significant of a degree.
Given how it's much larger than
Mainly
before,
because-
though, and trying to maintain that intensity, is the upwelling continuing even though it's moving quicker now?
Definitely. I mean, it is still pretty close to where it was stalled. But I would imagine within the next 24 hours or so, the storm will be moving over warmer waters.
Latest indications show that movement of this storm is roughly 7 miles per hour, and latest indications
Good Lord, 7 miles an hour?
7 miles an hour.
Oh, that's booking it.
Yes. And the current motion is nearly due north from the indications we're getting right now.
I'm just
Something-
happy it's moving at 7 miles an hour and it's not moving west.
Yeah, something to point
Turn
out.
that thing.
Something it's been doing for quite a while. It has continued to move east of the National Hurricane Center forecast cone since, I think it was yesterday morning. It's been moving east of every National Hurricane Center forecast track, sorry, not the cone, but the actual track at the center of the cone. And at the moment, it's about 17 miles east of that track.
That's even better. Keep going east. Miss the U.S. entirely.
Yeah, it's a big thing that it's moving east at this point because the National Hurricane Center are expecting its greatest westward movement to be occurring round about now, isn't it?
Yep.
So that's great news that it's moving just east, just west of north. So obviously the Florida coast isn't a line straight north. It's a little bit towards the northwest as it goes up there. So it is actually slowly pulling away mile by mile. We're talking about it being maybe about 100 miles off the coast earlier. At its closest point now, it's 103 miles. So every mile counts. It is starting ever so slowly to pull away at the minute. But of course, we've got to still be very cautious that it could just pull itself back at any time, can't it?
Yeah, it could. It could always wobble over to the west. You know, we're talking single digits here in miles. It could always wobble back to the west.
And this has been probably, you know, we obviously know what's happened in the Bahamas, and it's a absolutely terrible situation there. Something that we only witness every so often in one area, very rarely. But for people on the US coast, it has been such a long period of frayed nerves and nail biting as to whether parts of the coast will get damaging hurricane force conditions or not, and it's continuing tonight.
Yeah, well, the areas that I can pretty much say are getting pretty close to getting to the clear are West Palm Beach and south.
Yep.
You guys are good, pretty much. And the west coast of Florida seems to be getting out of this pretty much unscathed.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, we've been running our coverage for just over 4 days now. We haven't commentated for a lot of them hours, but we have provided, on some days, I think it was 8 or 9 hours of discussion. And we hope that it's been a very valuable resource. Okay, that's a loud vibration in the background. We hope it's been a very valuable resource, and that we feel like we've done a good job on this, trying our best to forecast what has been an extremely unpredictable storm, and to give out the latest warning information. And I think what really makes us more useful than anything is that we take your questions on the air as well whenever we can, and we intend to do more of that at this point. Just like this question, will this make landfall at Cape Hatteras, North Carolina? And well, that is certainly a distinct
Honestly,
possibility.
It is a distinct possibility, but honestly, with the way that the storm's angle is taking, if it does make landfall on Cape Hatteras itself, it would need to track over land first, then over the bay, then over Cape Hatteras, considering the angle the storm's moving at.
Wow. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that being the case. Very complex.
So
And I wonder
landfall
how
on
many
Cape
times.
Hatteras, yes.
I wonder how many times that would have happened. That kind of track. Well, we'll think about that. Anyway, let's move
Had
back.
to have happened before.
Yeah. Isaac, you're showing us some imagery as well, and you're often looking at the radar, very high resolution there. What are your observations?
Well, the southern side seems to be eroding a little bit in the latest frames.
Southern side now.
See in the beginning it looks pretty strong, and then later in the frames it starts going away slowly and slowly and slowly. So maybe it may be a kind of like a northern storm, like maybe like an Irene type of storm where most of the rain and heavy winds and convection on the northern side, and the southern side is relatively rain and wind free. Possibly is what it may be trying to do according to this radar, but it could be slightly skewing the data because it's kind of far out
It
from the
is.
radar range.
But what I can tell you on the latest satellite imagery is there is a weakness on that western side, on the innermost where the eye is. So that looks to me like it verifies, because it's looking very flaky around the whole south side, west side even more, but radar tells a different story. But south and east looking, yep, pretty weak there. You know something, those latest frames, this storm is looking pretty weak for a hurricane. Do you think we'll see more weakening tonight?
It's possible.
I think we will. I think we're
I hope
witnessing
for
it
the
right
best.
now.
I would agree. I think that cooler waters are going to allow it to weaken tonight a little bit more. I think structure will improve, intensity will not. And then I think that by tomorrow we might see some maintaining, if not gradual, strengthening.
Yes. Do we have any direct observations that are occurring right now? I mean to say, recon planes? Any news on that?
Hitting F5 right now.
Ah. All right then.
About the only news that I can find is Recon finding a lack of a defined center in Ferdinand, which looks fantastic.
Ferdinand,
They found
yes.
actually. They actually dropped 2 drop zones that got down to 1,000 millibars at Fernand.
Oh wow.
And still haven't found a change in direction of the winds in the eastern half of the. With Dorian,
Yeah, western side seems to be strong.
I'm taking a look here now because it looks like we do have AF 309 currently in the storm. I'm trying to figure out what the pressure is doing because, the SFMR readings of this storm have consistently said that this has been a mid-range Category 1 for the better part of a day now.
Interesting. Let's just go to Isaac's imagery, which is showing the edges of Tropical Storm Fernand, which is moving towards the coast of Mexico. And your thoughts on that? I'm sure you're more interested in that being in South Texas.
Yeah, I'm a tad. Well, yeah, so I kind of have a bias towards this thing. I'm not gonna lie, but yeah, I'm getting some gusty winds from this. Not really too strong, maybe about 20-25 mile an hour winds from this. I haven't seen any rain yet, but it's been overcast pretty much all today, and looks like we're gonna get hit by a light outer band, I guess, if you will, of the storm by the looks of it later tonight. Let me go over and pull up a graphic here really quick. It's gonna be really shaky on my end. Excuse that. Brownsville are forecasting 4 to 6 inches of rainfall in Brownsville, 3 to 4 in Harlingen, Weslaco, McAllen, 2 to 3 inches in Rio Grande City, 1 to 1/2 of an inch in Zapata, and Sarita, they're forecasting 2 to 3 inches, and in Corpus Christi, they're forecasting an inch or an inch and a half of rainfall from Fernand. So just a little bit of a rainmaker here.
The storm's going to make landfall south of the border, but rainfall will infiltrate into parts of Texas. So we have 2 tropical threats at this time for the United States. Devon, any news?
I'm just looking at the drop zones. Seems like the pressure's been staying pretty much relatively constant in the upper 950s. With the latest passes. Doesn't seem to be getting any weaker by means of pressure. And with the way that the wind field is expanded, I would think that the pressure remaining constant would mean that the wind speed is dropping,
Yes.
lowering, because the wind, but the pressure is remaining constant. At least that's what I think would be happening here.
It makes sense.
Still, then 960 millibars seems indicative of a Cat 2, but I guess we got an SFMR rating of 85 knots. So,
But the National Hurricane Center, minute
that's
running
the
with
thing.
110 miles an hour, you don't think it's that strong?
The NHC's been well over the SFMR rating since it was over the Bahamas. So, maybe the fact that this is still in shallow enough water where the SFMR is not exactly accurate. I'm not 100% sure, but this thing, I don't think this thing is much stronger than 100 miles an hour right now, if it is.
But why would they take SFMR readings if they know that it's improper?
Well, that they're the experts. They would know. Obviously, they can't just flip a switch that says no more SFMR. I mean, it's a built-in thing to the aircraft, and it's still going to record the data.
Sure.
It's just that, it's a built-in thing to the aircraft.
All right. Well, that's interesting. The National Hurricane Center, we assume, are still doing all the updates, and we should get that update in just a few minutes, assuming that they are. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be. But that is the latest at this time. I'm not really sure what we should be talking about at this point. Well, let's hop back over to Thomas's radar. Any new developments, thunderstorms, which areas they're affecting at this moment?
There's nothing too new that's developed, with the exception of the fact that we do have that western side looking like it's expanding over Florida with time. So it does look like.
Can we zoom in a lot more on the storm area near Orlando?
Yeah, we can. So there we go, and we can see the heavy rains moving into Orlando now, and I would think that tropical storm force winds are also arriving pretty shortly afterwards, if not with the rain band. You can see how close the green line from the NHC is, and that was issued about an hour or two ago, and these bands were right about where that line is. So I'd say tropical storm force winds in Orlando isn't entirely unlikely, although there is a good chance that they're not. I don't think they're sustained, especially since there's a lot of friction from land. I'm not sure how tropical storm force winds could survive all the way from around Deltona or Edgewater to Orlando, but I think definitely tropical storm force gusts are occurring.
You also have to realize this is Florida, so that's the reason why. There's no mountains or anything there. It's not like that there's a 1,000-foot hill between the shore and Orlando to break the wind. So I think it's safe to say you might as well call Florida an ocean. It's not perfect, obviously, but it's not like that there's anything between the ocean and Orlando to break that wind. So I would probably say tropical storm force winds, if they're happening on the coast, they're definitely happening in Orlando.
Thomas, do you want to tilt the screen upwards so we can see further north?
Yeah, there we go.
So,
there we go, that's better.
Yep, a lot more coming in along that line, and this is how we can really get some significant rain accumulations, isn't it?
This is just constant rainfall.
This is what we like to call storms that are training. When you have the storm moving in one direction, but the storms are moving in the exact same direction, or they just keep on replacing each other, moving along the same line. And that tends to happen a lot with slow-moving tropical systems, especially when they're interacting with land. You tend to get a lot of training thunderstorms. So anything that's along that red line there will probably be receiving those training thunderstorms for quite a bit of a while.
And what kind of rain rates are we looking at there at the moment?
That I would not know. Do you have Doppler Radar estimated 1 hour rainfall on that?
I believe so.
If you could turn that on, that will probably give us a good rain rate.
I'm turning on dual polarization stuff.
But the Orlando area there, heavy rainfall persisting at this time.
There we go. Here are 1 hour rain rates.
So nearly.
Can you tell us what those colors mean? 0.8 inches.
0.7.
So we're probably talking about rain rates of about an inch an hour in those bands. At
That's
tops,
quite
up
a
to an
bit.
inch an hour.
That's quite a bit, because those areas are only expecting, or were only expecting, maybe 2 or 3 inches from the whole event on recent forecasts.
Well, yeah, that's the forecast, but of course, isolated events like thunderstorms will drive the rainfall total way up.
Well, there we are. So if you're in that area, basically along the I-4 corridor as far as Kissimmee, yep, a lot of rain occurring all along there right now, up to Daytona Beach. I think we had a question just then, did we? No, just an observation that there is heavy rain occurring in Orlando, and we can see it just as you can on the ground. We're going to take a short break here at Force 13 HQ. We'll have another hour of coverage after this. Stay tuned, we'll have more on Dorian. We'll be back. Coverage continues in a moment. You can also help the project become even better by becoming a patron. You can see more information about all the benefits involved by visiting patreon.com/Force13. With a special thanks to these people for being our most valued patrons this month. You can also check out You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. This is Force 13 Live, latest update on Hurricane Dorian. Another hour of coverage here on the stream, which has been rolling on for over 4 days, whilst we've been watching the progress of this terrifying storm for many different reasons. It is still rather strong. A Category 2. It was 110 miles per hour, the latest National Hurricane Center update as of 9 p.m. keeps it at 110 miles per hour and a pressure of 958 millibars. My name's Nathan Foy. I'm joined in this hour by Orlando, Devon, and Thomas.
Yep, I'm still here.
Same.
So, keeping the same wind speed, 110 miles an hour. The core of the hurricane is moving nearly parallel to, but offshore of, the east coast of central Florida. A sustained wind of 70 miles per hour and a gust of 85 miles per hour were recently reported at NOAA buoy 41010, located north of Dorian's eye. At Indian River, Florida, a sustained wind of 40 miles an hour and a wind gust of 51 miles per hour was recently reported. Do those numbers make sense to you?
Makes sense to me.
Same here.
Same.
So, minimal tropical storm force winds occurring along the Florida coast still at this time, generally. Wind gusts, though, above 50 miles an hour. That is, significant for sure. But for hurricane conditions to be occurring along the coast, the storm would need to take pretty much a substantial westward jog or even a westward phase, which isn't really occurring at the moment. Let me just get an estimate of how far the storm has moved in the very near term in just the last half an hour or hour. About 10 miles north-northwest in the last hour. Thomas, you're showing us some more imagery at this point. Can you tell us anything about the eye structure, the very latest?
Yeah, so currently the radar site itself isn't seeming to load properly, so I'm having to resort to national radar while that's in the process of loading. But what I've noticed is in the last couple of frames, the western eye wall does look better in appearance, as it does on satellite imagery as well. Something that is interesting in the latest few frames, both on radar and on satellite, is this new clearing of clouds that's beginning here on the western side. So it looks like the western side is still struggling to hold on right now.
Interesting.
Shnikes.
During this hour, we are open to questions, so send any questions in and we will take them on the air whenever we can get time to. To reiterate some of the warnings, start your message with Force 13, by the way, on the YouTube chat. The warnings right now: a storm surge warning for Jupiter Inlet to Surf City, a storm surge watch for north of Surf City to Duck, North Carolina, Pamlico and Albemarle Sounds, and the Noosa and Pamlico Rivers, a hurricane warning for Sebastian Inlet to Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, and north of the Savannah River to Surf City, North Carolina, a hurricane watch for north of Ponte Vedra Beach to Savannah River, north of Surf City to the North Carolina-Virginia border, and Albemarle and Pamlico Sounds. Tropical storm warning for Grand Bahama and the Abacos Islands in the northwestern Bahamas, still I'm afraid. North of Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida to Savannah River, and Jupiter Inlet to Sebastian Inlet, Florida. Tropical storm watch for the North Carolina-Virginia border to Chincoteague, Virginia, and Chesapeake Bay from Smith Point southwards. To reiterate some of the expected hazards, obviously you've got those winds, hurricane conditions likely to occur somewhere in the hurricane warning zone. Storm surge, Savannah River to Cape Lookout, 4 to 7 feet above normal heights if it occurs at high tide. Volusia Brevard County line to Savannah River, 3 to 5 feet. Cape Lookout to Duck, 3 to 5 feet. And Jupiter Inlet to Volusia Brevard County line, 2 to 4 feet. Expected rainfall, northwestern Bahamas, an additional 1 to 3 inches. Isolated storm totals over 30 inches. Coastal Carolinas 5 to 10 inches, isolated 15. The Atlantic coast from the Florida Peninsula north of West Palm Beach through Georgia and across southeast Virginia, 3 to 6 inches. Obviously, you've got the large swells and surf conditions too. It's going to be dangerous along the coast, everywhere from southern Florida all the way through to the North Carolina Outer Banks. And a tornado or two are possible near the immediate east coast of Florida during the next several hours. This risk will shift to along the immediate coasts of Georgia and the Carolinas on Wednesday into Thursday. Let me just check the latest National Weather Service warnings to see if there are any new ones out in the Florida area for anything specific. There is a special marine warning over Lake Okeechobee right now. And another special marine warning east of Homestead. Just to read those out. Special marine warning until 9:15 p.m. for Lake Okeechobee. At 8:58 p.m. a shower was located near Clewiston, moving south at 35 knots. So wind gusts of 34 knots or greater expected there. And coastal waters from Deerfield Beach to Ocean Reef, Florida, out 20 nautical miles in effect until 9:45 p.m. Possible water spouts and wind gusts of 34 knots or greater. I think there's another one there as well. Yeah, waters from Deerfield Beach from 20 to 60 nautical miles to Ocean Reef, Florida, excluding the territorial waters of the Bahamas. Again, water spouts possible with wind gusts of nearly 50 knots. So those are the main things. None of them over land areas at this point, but that would be a severe thunderstorm warning equivalent, I'm led to believe. And as we now look back at Thomas's radar scope, the main area there isn't actually that much rainfall occurring over Florida, apart from that trail over Interstate 4.
Yeah, it seems like pretty much modest rainfall here. A lot of the heaviest rain is currently staying offshore into the east. You can imagine where all those yellows are. That's got to be where all the hurricane force winds are.
And is that quite an accurate rule of thumb there with radar?
Not necessarily, but the fact that we don't have hurricane force winds ashore, and that seems to be just about the right place where the hurricane force winds would be, that's where I'd say.
All right. Let's see if we can take some questions at this point. What are our thoughts on the two disturbances off the coast of Africa? Well, that is something we have been looking at.
There's two of them?
There will be two of them, yes.
Yeah.
So one of them already exists. The other one is yet to emerge off the coast of Africa, has a very high chance of development.
TD8 it is now.
TD8 has already formed indeed. Here it is now. No, not that one. This one.
TD.
Tropical Depression 8.
Yep.
Quite a bit now to the west of the Cape Verde Islands, going to move towards the northwest. Out over open waters, not going to affect anything, thankfully. But the thing behind it isn't really visible on this map. It might be that thing just about to emerge off Africa, I'm not quite sure. But something will emerge off Africa very soon and has a 70% chance of development in the next 5 days. Models are indicating that it could be a long-track major hurricane, so that is something we certainly need to watch out for over the next week. But it won't reach any land areas, say the Caribbean or the Western Atlantic. That's still a whole week away, more than that quite possibly. So we've got plenty of time to see just exactly what the track forecast is going to look like. But early long-range indications from models show that it could take a ride towards the Western Atlantic, and then anything is possible.
Right. Well, what I can say is if it does become a major hurricane in the eastern Atlantic, the odds of it getting into the western Atlantic are basically nil.
Well, that's something we'll watch out for. But from what we were looking at on longer range models, it is long range, is that it would only reach major hurricane status near the Lesser Antilles and pass just north.
That would be extremely annoying.
Yeah, it would for everyone involved. Let's bring you back just to show you somewhere here, just scooting about through all of my panels. This is the latest National Hurricane Center warning map for Hurricane Dorian. So it will make its closest pass to Florida, to central Florida this evening and tonight. It's 100 miles offshore, just over. Closest pass to Jacksonville, that will be early tomorrow afternoon, possibly into the evening hours. And then by the nighttime hours, it will pass close to Georgia. And then Thursday morning, you're looking at its closest approach to South Carolina, which could be a very close approach if this forecast verifies. And then just grazing the coast of North Carolina throughout Thursday evening, overnight into Friday. And then it shoots off towards the northeast, and then it could be a significant hurricane threat for Atlantic Canada over the weekend. Already up above 50% chance of tropical storm conditions in Nova Scotia and in Newfoundland. Alright, let's see if we've got some more questions here. When do we see it turning directly north, or when is it expected to go straight north? Well, the National Hurricane Center don't think it will turn directly towards the north until Wednesday evening, but from what we're seeing on latest satellite imagery is that it is moving very close to due north, but not quite, still a slight westward element. It could still veer over towards the west a bit more, but at the minute it is still staying east of this National Hurricane Center forecast track. At the latest estimate, just going to get a new estimate now on how far east it is going from the forecast track. This is going to take a short minute or two. It's about 15 miles east, and that number is actually decreasing a little bit, so it is getting closer to the center of that track. I think there must have been a bit of a westward jog in the last hour.
Likely.
And Thomas, are you seeing evidence of that? Well, there's his radar scope in any case. Still looking strong there on the northwestern side of that eye wall, but Devon, would you say it is something to do with the radar, or is it true that the southeastern side and eastern side there is looking so bereft of anything?
It could be a combination of things. It could be that the radar is just not seeing to the Sorry about that. I'm almost choked. Okay. Yeah. Give me a minute here.
All right. Well, Devon taking some time to recover there. I don't think he can quite believe what he's seeing. But the northwestern side there looking much stronger. It looks like the southeastern side is incredibly weak on that imagery. Let's see if we can now bring us back to water vapor imagery and see if we can take anything from that. Here is that National Hurricane Center map once again. Yeah, go ahead.
Yep. So talking about the radar imagery, so the southeastern side being weak and the eastern side being weak in general, that can deal with that could be caused by a whole mess of things. Probably the most likely thing is that the radar is seeing through a lot of the storm, so it's not actually able to pick up the really strong signatures on the east side of the storm. So that probably has a lot to do with it, along with the fact that the entire storm structure is. So those two things combined make the eye look really, really poor on radar. It would be nice if we had some radar in the Bahamas so we can see the eastern side of the eye wall, but I don't think we're going to be seeing any radar from the Bahamas anytime soon.
Latest water vapor imagery then shows the structure of the storm and, well, struggling in those latest frames. Let's just see if we can stop on that last frame because I do want to examine it a little bit more. There is the last frame of the image. So you can see on the eastern side there's a slot there, a fracture quite clearly. And then you've got the northwestern side. I mean, Devon, this is an eye, obviously. It's an open eye, would you say?
It definitely appears to be one. There's not much of it left, that's for sure. On satellite, it at least shows that there is a clearing in the center, which I guess you can call an eye. But typically, for there to be an eye, you need an eye wall to surround it, and the eye wall to surround it is not exactly there. Now, what could end up happening is that the like we said, as the storm pulls northward, it could potentially get its act together at least a little bit before latitude really starts taking into effect and starts weakening the storm entirely. But it could be the case over the next 24 hours that we could see the storm strengthen at least a little bit. How much is uncertain.
But we'll look at this cloud top
But it really
evolution.
depends on.
Look at the cloud top evolution.
Yeah.
There are lots of reds and dark reds, those darker areas there denoting very close to minus 70-degree cloud tops, which is impressive. And then those
And now
dark
they're
reds
gone.
faded. It was just this image here is when the dark reds left. That is, when was that? That was nearly 2 hours ago. And then
Yeah,
even
the
red
greens are
colors,
gone on my image.
even the red colors are going at the moment on the latest imagery. Yeah, you're showing some. Oh, could you show that by any chance?
Yes, just let me do a few clicky things.
Yeah, it'd be great to see that imagery. But on this image that we're looking at here, even the red areas are completely fading away, and that is minus 60-degree cloud tops for those in the know. We're looking sort of for minus 70 surround the eye if we're looking at a category 5 with a good eye. Minus 60s would be what, category 3 really, with a decent eye.
Yeah,
or
that
an eye
would
like
be
this.
that would be like 110. 115, 120 miles an hour.
And now there's hardly any of that at all. I think on this color scale, the green is, no, let's see, the yellow I think must be minus 50. So there isn't even that much yellow. It's not full yellow ring around the eye. That's minus 50.
Nope.
So that would be what, category 2? And the green areas
Yeah,
are all
and
minus
you
40s.
gotta figure that it doesn't even wrap all the way around, and you can't see all the way down to the ocean floor in the eye.
And now let's look at your
So
imagery,
all-
Devon.
Yeah, I do have it screen shared.
Yep, we got it here.
So you can see I've got at least the past, I believe, 6 hours. That might have a little bit more than that, but you can
Yep.
see all the greens and reds. There go the reds. There goes the greens.
But the thing is, as we look at the latest images on that loop, the northwestern side has a massive gap in it right there. Yet the northwestern side on radar imagery appears to be pretty much the strongest area.
And again, that may have something to do with the fact that the radar is just unable to penetrate to the eastern side of the storm from Florida.
Right. But it could still see the southeast side, and that's not quite as strong either. Looking back at that radar, it's a little area, but it's very thin compared to that northwest, which has a very bulky area of yellows and reds on the radar.
Yeah. Definitely.
Any explanation for that? Well, no,
I'll,
I suppose that is quite
you
consistent with the
know,
satellite, actually.
I mean, you can see that there is a thunderstorm buildup that you can really see on the satellite imagery there on the western side. Even though the northwestern side has a big break on it, if you take a look at the western side, that's where most of the greens really lie on the storm anymore, is just in that western band, and even then they're dying off really quick.
Yeah, it blew up, and then it was... There's the blow up, and then it died off. Well...
One thing that's also really interesting, if you look at the band coming on shore Florida there, towards the end of the frame, you can really see where those thunderstorms are directly training over Interstate 4 on the infrared imagery.
Looking out for that there. Yep, there it is pushing in. If you've got any comments or questions for us in this hour, we will oblige and take them. We will be obliged to take them. Which hurricane model was the most accurate for Dorian? Oh dear. Oh dear.
Man, I really don't want to say this. Really don't want to say this.
This can't be good.
But by default, and I really put that disclaimer in there, by default, NAM was most accurate for intensity.
Oh my word.
And that's absolutely pathetic, but also, in fairness, the NAM model made Barry into an 887 millibar storm. So there you go. It's a terrible model.
I think it also was the most accurate for Michael.
We don't talk about that. like I said, by default, the NAM. Sadly.
Wow.
What made us bring up the NAM?
As far as the most accurate by track, I don't really know which one is the most accurate by track right now. I haven't really been paying attention to see which ones have been more or less accurate on track.
I'm gonna have a little look.
Mainly because the model spread has not necessarily been wide for this storm, even when it was stalling. Typically when you see storms stalling, you tend to see the spaghetti models like go all over the place. You didn't see that with this storm. So the models pretty much lied right on top of each other for the entire storm's existence. So I don't know if there's really a clear winner or a loser when it comes to the models here. It's either they all won or they all lost.
Looking at models from 5 days ago right now on my other screen, the best one for the 5-day position, that is to say the position now compared to then, is the COTI model, which has the storm very close.
Coamps?
Yeah, very close to where it is now, a little bit further north on 120 hours. All the other models have pushed into Florida by then. Problem with that is that that same model took it north of the Bahamas in the first place.
Right.
So again, that points to be no clear winner, because the models that took it through the Bahamas, as the storm did, then went straight over central Florida.
And then we got model agreement for no landfall in Florida.
I can tell you which model's done the worst.
Said landfall in Florida.
I can tell you which model's done the worst. The HMON, which wanted the Florida Keys landfall at this point.
Nice.
From 5 days ago, the HMON had a Florida Keys landfall occurring right now. Nope, that is not happening. Let's see what other questions we might have. People enjoying the conversation, interestingly. What is to expect from Tropical Depression 8? I can tell you very little. It is a depression in the eastern Atlantic. It's going to move northwest, stay well out at sea, far, far away from anything. Fernand is more interesting than that right now. It's affecting the coast of Mexico. Devon doesn't like it very much, delivering significant amounts of rain to the coast. Could be up to, 15 inches for parts of Mexico. And also, I think it was 6 inches or something in southern Texas. Isaac showed it earlier. But I guess we're really waiting for the system that will come behind Tropical Depression 8, which models forecast could become a significant Cape Verde hurricane. A Cape Verde type hurricane, that is, if you've not heard of that term before. Devon, do you want to explain?
Cape Verde type hurricane, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, so pretty much what that means is that is any hurricane that originated in the eastern Atlantic. Pretty much, that's all that means.
They do have a reputation, though, don't they?
They do have a reputation. They have a reputation of the large majority of Cape Verde hurricanes end up missing land. A very large majority of them end up missing land.
But they do tend to be
the-
the strongest hurricanes generally, don't they?
They do tend to be the strongest. If you remember, I believe 2011 had one Cape Verde hurricane. It was Katia. It was the strongest, and it hit England.
It did.
So that should tell you everything that you need to know about Cape Verde storms. Now, but usually the storms that form very close to the Cape Verde Islands, and by very close, I'd probably say within 500 miles of the Cape Verde Islands, a very large majority of them track directly out to sea. Only a very small fraction of them actually do end up making it to land. And so you have to be quite a remarkable storm, say like an Ivan or an Isabel or an Irma. Gosh, there's 3 ice storms right there that I named off. Or another one I think would be Hurricane Luis, but even then, that only hit the Lesser Antilles. I'm trying to think of any other extremely long-tracked, long-duration storm. I said Isabel already.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Like I said, you've got Isabel, you've got Ivan, you have Irma, you have Luis.
We should know these
and
things.
Igor was pretty long track, wasn't it?
Igor was a pretty long track storm. Another ice storm. Okay, here's a lesson. If the ice storm comes off of Africa, it's going to be a long track and very dangerous storm. There's your lesson for that one. That's not where I wanted to go. That's where we've ended up. But anyways, yeah, the only outlier there would be Luis. But
Fran was a comment that just came in there. Is Fran one?
Fran, was that really a Cape Verde storm?
I'm not sure. Was Hugo?
Yeah, Hugo was definitely pretty long track. Yeah, Fran was actually. The thing about Fran, though, is that it almost doesn't really count because it was extremely weak for its entire track. Like, if you take a look at Fran, it didn't even become a hurricane until it was maybe 300 miles east of the Lesser Antilles. Like, we're talking about storms that end up getting hurricane status even further east than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
otherwise, you could throw Dorian in the same bracket.
Yeah, exactly. You could throw Dorian in the same bracket. So yeah, it is very rare for storms to form that far east and hit land.
We've just had a question about us, whether we do this kind of thing year-round. We absolutely do. We have been doing this year-round storm updates all around the world since 2012. And we continue all the time. We got storms all around the world at this point. I think later tonight we might be breaking off our coverage to prep some new graphics and some new formats so that we can actually cover all of those other storms around the world as Dorian weakens. Of course, if the storm isn't weakening, we will remain on for the foreseeable, but things are starting to change around the world. We will be finishing at the end of this hour with our commentary with another storm update following at 11 PM Eastern, which we will run here on the stream, and then we'll decide what we're doing next. But at the minute, this is what it's looking like. It is very rare that we run live streams for as long as we have, just over 4 days. For Florence and Mancutt, we were here for 7 days. And during Matthew, we were here for just over 5 days live streaming. Of course, we do regular videos all the time on the channel when we're not live streaming, so if you do want more updates, then subscribing is a good idea because the videos are always coming out. And the origin of the channel wasn't actually storm updates in the first place. It was more animations of previous seasons, which we still do as well. So there's a lot of general hurricane information and all kinds of other things that happen on the channel. But there we are. That's my brief finished. Looking at latest imagery that Waning continues. The eastern side now has the highest cloud tops, and they're again only in the oranges. So if you were to give the satellite appearance a mile per hour rating, you'd be barely calling this a category 2 at this point, I would say.
I'm tempted to
I
call
think that
it a
would be
Cat
in
1.
line with what the Recon is saying too. I would say 100 miles an hour for this.
Yeah, I mean, it's weakening. It's reminding me a lot of Trammy right now with just how quickly it's just going away.
Yeah, we also have some breaking
And-
news. Tropical Storm Gabrielle is going to be named. Tropical Depression 8 will become Tropical Storm Gabrielle at the update at 11 p.m. Doesn't mean a huge amount. That's the one that's going to stay way out at sea in the central Atlantic. We expected that would happen, but that is our next name on the list. Gabrielle has now been named. I would update the graphics at the bottom, but I'm talking to you at the same time. We don't have a team big enough to do graphics whilst streaming. Okay, well, yeah, there we are. If you're interested in joining us, by the way, to help out with our work, we are looking for support in all shapes and sizes and all manner of disciplines, because our coverage continues to get better, and we are doing our very best to try and deliver the information to you that is most needed at this point. Send a message to our email address, contact@force13.com. Let's go back to the latest radar imagery, which is being shown to us by Thomas at this point. Any change at all?
Just
Devin, you
it
want to...
doesn't look like too much change. I don't even know if that's updating live or not.
Yeah, that is updating live.
All right, cool. One thing to point out right now is that the ATCF has designated OAL as Tropical Storm Gabriel.
Yes, that's just what I was pointing out before. Leaving just the other invest out there at this time. Just checking any other information. I think Typhoon Ling Ling will be up to 85 miles per hour as well. And apart from that, no real changes. Although Juliet is weakening, we already knew that, I think. And Fernand is at 50 miles per hour. So that is the tropics in a nutshell. Around the world, there are 10 systems active, and let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Which
5,
is insane.
7 of them are named. Nope, not named. 6 of them are named with one unnamed storm right now. And don't ask us for the specifics as to why it's unnamed. It's a long story.
Yep. It should be noted that the record for the most amount of named systems occurring at once in the world is 8.
Interesting. When was that? I don't actually know this stat.
2015, of course. What other year would it be?
I would
And
have
we
to
could
go
exceed
back and
that in
verify
short
that.
order.
I would have to go and verify that, but that was a huge amount of storms at that time. But remember last year, back in September, when we were doing live streaming too, there were, I think, 7 storms active at that point. It's a crazy time.
Yeah, it's
September.
very, very rare to get over 6 storms active.
All right, let's take some questions.
So to break into 7, especially.
Yep. Someone in the chat mentioned that Dorian stalled due to lack of steering currents. Could we elaborate a bit for the meteorological illiterate? I guess explain the process that we've seen over the last few days.
Okay, so what happens is that these storms, they're all driven by upper level steering current. So when you take a look at these satellite images, you take a look at the infrared, the big colorish images, you're seeing the top levels of the storm, but you're really not seeing like the steering level. The steering level, you need to go way further up into the atmosphere, way above the storms, actually, like at the 200, 300 millibar level. That is where the storms are actually getting steered from the most part. Like in the 300, 500 millibar level, That's where the storms are getting steered from. And what ends up happening up there is that, well, you'll notice that the high pressures, they tend to steer the storms clockwise, obviously. And the low pressures, obviously, will steer it counterclockwise. And you notice that low pressures typically attract, high pressures typically repel. And that is kind of a basic thing here. But what happens is when there are no high pressures or low pressures in the vicinity of the storm to tell it where to go, what will end up happening is that the storm will end up stalling. Now, why does it end up stalling? Well, it's the same thing if you've ever pushed a toy car along the ground. What you'll end up noticing is that it'll slowly move speed as you're not applying force to it anymore. So when a storm's moving along the southern edge of a ridge, it's pushing it along. The ridge is actually pushing the storm along. But if that ridge all of a sudden goes away, there's nothing to push the storm along. Friction itself is actually going to make the storm go slower and slower and slower, and eventually it'll end up stopping. So that's basically what ended up happening over, unfortunately, directly over Grand Bahama Island, is that the ridge that was to the north of the storm completely disappeared. So suddenly there was nothing to push the storm forward. So it just stalled and it just stayed there. Now that the trough is starting to pick the storm up, now it's moving north. There's actually a force being applied to the storm. But when there's no net forces being applied to the storm, what ends up happening is that the only force is the storm's own friction. And that actually slows the storm down proportionally to how fast the storm is moving. That's why as it moves slower, the amount that it's actually slowing down by also goes down. That's why it will really quickly slow down from like 10 miles an hour to 4 miles an hour, but it'll take forever to get it from like 4 to 2 or 2 to 1. So the slowdown happens basically exponentially. And as it slows down completely, that's what ends up happening here over the Bahamas. Go ahead.
And that very tight loop that it did as well when it was near Grand Bahama, was that because they were saying at the time it was because of an eye wall replacement cycle?
Yeah, that was completely due to the inner eye wall disintegrating within the storm, and that's what caused those wobbles.
Well, there we are. Praise for your explanation, Devon, in the comment section. If you have any more questions for any of us right now, either relating directly to the storm and its impacts or the workings behind it, or anything even vaguer than that, I suppose, we got another 20 minutes here with you. Not too much is happening with this storm right now. There are significant rain bands moving through the I-4 corridor right now, though, as you can see here depicted on the radar presented by Thomas. Looks like it's just west of Orlando now. Moving on further west.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. It looks like this is marching westward as the storm itself expands as well and has a slight westward motion. So I'm not sure how far west this could go, but this could go a good bit farther west. It's moving towards Clearmount right now, Leesburg. It could get closer to the western side of Florida than I think we thought it could, as it does seem like it has picked up some speed in those last few frames.
And just looking further north, those bands moving near Daytona Beach, are they still blowing up and expanding?
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what's going on.
There it is. And that's the only real major stuff that's happening right now along the coast of Florida. Of course, tropical storm force winds are possible anywhere in those zones. And they've actually, I think they've issued a flood advisory for that whole strip there as well. Let me read this out.
They should.
Yeah, this was issued actually quite a while ago, 9/08. They issued a flood advisory till 11 p.m. for western Seminole County, southeastern Lake County, western Orange County, and central Volusia County in Florida. Doppler Radar and automated rain gauges indicated heavy rain. Obviously you can see it, which will cause minor flooding in the advisory area. Up to 2 inches of rain have already fallen. It's probably more now. So some locations that will experience flooding: Orlando, Deltona, Daytona Beach, Sanford and Apopka. Additional rainfall of 1 to 2 inches is expected over the area. This additional rain will result in minor flooding, especially in urbanized areas. And the precautionary measures: turn around, don't drown when encountering flooded roads. Most flood deaths do occur in vehicles. Excessive runoff from heavy rainfall will cause flooding of small creeks and streams, urban areas, highways, streets and underpasses, as well as other drainage areas and low-lying spots. So, flood advisory for that area. There are flood warnings either side of that as well. Not sure if it's directly related to this or whether it's just a general statement. I think those are the same ones we've been reading out all day. River flood warning remains in effect for the St. John's River above Lake Harney near Geneva, and for the St. John's River at Astor. And also, that's it. Okay, that is. Oh no, the flood warning continues at Cypress Creek at Worthington Gardens. So just those 2 flood warnings that are out there at the moment. In general, do we think it's not producing as much rain as we thought, apart from this line?
Seems like it's producing just about the amount of rain that was forecasted, which is a good thing.
Alright, I suppose so. And if you've not seen the latest forecast for the rainfall from the National Weather Service, you can see it on the screen somewhere. Not here, but here. If you've been watching the last few days, you'll noted that the rainfall expectations have fallen slightly along the coast of South and North Carolina, up to about 9 or 10 inches. But earlier we were seeing maybe 11 or 12 inches. But now along the coast, 6 to 10 inches in the orange shaded area, and the 10-inch bracket just falling off the coast. So that's interesting to see, and we'll see whether that holds up. But you could still see up to 4 inches in Norfolk, Virginia, onto Delmarva Peninsula, possibly up to 4 inches there as well. Somewhat annoying that the graphic doesn't extend further northeast, because I'm not sure how much rain we're expecting in places like Cape Cod and especially Atlantic Canada. But I assume we'll be looking in the 1 to 2 inch range. Of course, as storms move further north, that is, the cloud tops degrade generally with latitude, and the rainfall amounts decrease, where you reach a relationship between the two, Devon,
Also,
where the rainfall increases for the same. The rainfall decreases, for the same amount of wind speed as it moves further north.
you also have to consider the storm will also be moving considerably faster at that.
Definitely. Latest frames there on the imagery. More of the eye is appearing, but still the cloud tops are becoming increasingly poor.
Only good news. Only
I
good
mean,
news.
You know, the structure still looks... You could actually say the structure looks better right now than it did before. Well, Thomas, what are we looking at on radar? Any differences that we can see in the eye? No.
Not too much, really, no. The western side looks very full on radar, though. Looks a lot more full than it does on infrared. But other than that, not really.
So looking towards Cape Canaveral right now, do you think some of that orange, yellow areas will move on shore very soon? Because they are swirling around right now.
I would think as the storm does expand, some of those areas will be moving ashore relatively shortly, yeah.
One thing I would like to say is that the airplane is currently doing circles in the eye of Dorian. Pressure seems to be, again, just sitting still in the upper 950s here. Might gain a millibar here, might lose a millibar there, but pretty much it's stayed in the upper 950s for the past 6.
Indeed. Just looking for any more questions here. Questions about Fernand and the tropical depression. There's not much to say about it. Just that the tropical depression 8 will be named Gabrielle tropical storm at the 11 p.m. advisory. That's news that we're receiving here, according to the automated system, the ATCF. I'd be really, I don't think that's ever happened where they've named the storm on the ATCF and the National Hurricane Center haven't gone with it. So it would be very embarrassing for them if that was the case for the ATCF, which is run by the US Navy. But nonetheless, another question wondering if beach dunes will hold back storm surge.
Depends on how high the storm surge is. How high are your beach dunes?
But we're looking.
If your beach dunes are yay high and your storm surge is yay higher, your beach dunes ain't gonna stop that storm surge.
In essence, just to reiterate though, if this does help you, storm surges estimates if it strikes a high tide: Savannah River to Cape Lookout, North Carolina, 4 to 7 feet. Volusia Brevard County line to Savannah River, 3 to 5 feet expected. Cape Lookout to Duck, North Carolina, 3 to 5 feet. Jupiter Inlet to Volusia Brevard County line, 2 to 4 feet. So measure them sand dunes.
Yeah, that's pretty much. I personally wouldn't measure the sand dunes. I would personally think, okay, here I am at the top of the beach. I would treat that top of the beach as sea level, and then move another 5 feet up, or generally just move another 5 feet up.
Totally.
Even if you live in the mountains, just move another 5 feet up, just to be sure.
Another question: how devastating would a landfall in Charleston, South Carolina be? Now that is something that can't yet be ruled out, by the way, because it is within the cone.
Yeah, that would not be a fun landfall, to say the least. The Charleston, because of the proximity, that would also basically be a landfall in the Savannah, Georgia area as well. That would definitely bring hurricane force winds to the Savannah, Georgia area, and we'd be talking about areas that would receive hurricane force winds. I don't think they received hurricane force winds during Matthew. Wow. So we'd be talking about, I'm pretty sure they didn't.
Oh yeah, I remember that. It was just off the coast, wasn't it, the whole time? After the Cape Canaveral hurricane force conditions, the hurricane force would be just off the coast the whole time, weren't they?
That's what it looked like to me, if I'm remembering the storm correctly. And then, so that would mean that hurricane force winds would push ashore in a region that hasn't seen hurricane force winds since at least the 80s, potentially even the 70s, if we're talking about Savannah.
Let's just get another quick estimate as to how far the storm is deviating east from the National Hurricane Center's forecast. Latest estimate, still about 14 miles. It is coming back towards that track, though, generally, although it does seem to be leveling out. So it's still staying east of the track. National Hurricane Center will update in just over an hour with the full update with the new forecast cone, which hopefully will shift slightly east. The 10 p.m. update from the National Hurricane Center is due in the next 10 minutes. We'll bring that to you, and then we will be finishing up for the evening here, but there will be another update at 11 which will appear on the stream, so stay tuned for that, and then we'll be signing off for the night. So we're just waiting for that update, but the eye structure looking so much better in those latest frames, even though the cloud tops aren't looking so good.
And that's what needs to happen. It needs to gain its core structure back before it'll get any of its cloud tops back.
I'm still hopeful, Devon, as we watch this imagery, that this weakening trend is terminal, and that we don't see more re-strengthening.
I think we're all hopeful about this one, Nathan. We're all really hopeful, just thinking, oh, finally this is going to be it for this storm. I think this is the first time, I'm just taking a look at the latest frames. I think this is the first time that we haven't seen any of the green clouds, at least from the core of the storm. We haven't seen any of the green clouds over the Bahamas in the last 48 hours.
Oh, that's good.
So I'm not, like, it's just continues to slowly pull away. Just very slowly. Just please move away from those islands. They've suffered enough.
Let me just see if we can bring up the latest model guidance, which will tell us about expected wind shear and things like that over the next 24 hours, which might help us make a bit of a judgment call on whether we'll see further intensification or not. Not loading well for me at the moment, so we'll stand by on that. But whilst we wait, you can see the National Hurricane Center track map there on the screen. That will update in just over an hour. National Hurricane Center will have a 10 p.m. hourly update as well. It still has winds of 110 miles per hour according to them. Pressure of 958 millibars. We think it could be just a little bit weaker at this point. We also have Tropical Storm Fernand, which is at 50 miles an hour, contrary to what it was said on the screen just then. And Tropical Storm Gabrielle looks like it's going to be official in just over an hour's time. It is displayed on the ATCF system. So another Atlantic storm, 3 at a time. Here now I can show you the models from RAM, a multi-model spread here. So what you'll notice immediately is that up here on the wind speed estimate panel on the forecast, so the vertical lines are where the model runs have initiated. That's pretty much where we're at right now, the last line. And you can see there, generally, we're looking towards a 5 to 10 knot increase in winds over the later part of Wednesday. Now, why is that? Well, looks like wind shear is going to reach a new low during the day on Wednesday. This is the wind shear graphic on the right hand side. You can see that it's near 0 values for the middle part of the day Wednesday, before it goes back up to a peak of 20 knots on Wednesday night. So we could see more substantial weakening at that point. Then it has another dip on Thursday, and then it really skyrockets as we enter Friday. Hopefully they are lowballing that a little bit with the wind shear, because that's really the big difference to whether this storm will strengthen or not. Relative humidity is on the way down. SSTs are going to rise a little bit, as we know. Still estimate to be... Well, this is interesting actually, because some models completely disagreeing, because the HWRF estimates that the temperature has gone down to about 23 thanks to that upwelling. GFS and CTCX aren't really seeing that on that model run at all. Do you think that might be applying a bias to those model runs then?
Yes, it's an important thing to note that the HWRF and HMON do take ocean upwelling into effect. Meanwhile, models like the GFS, Navy COAMPS, NavGem, ECMWF, CMC, all the global models, they don't take into effect storm upwelling.
That's an interesting point.
All right,
that hasn't been covered. It is.
The 10 p.m. update is out. 110 miles per hour, 958 millibars. So
a sustained
about
wind,
the same as it
that
was before.
An update.
A sustained wind of 74 miles per hour and a gust of 90 miles per hour were recently reported at NOAA buoy 41010, located north of Dorian's Eye. At New Smyrna Beach, Florida, a sustained wind of 39 miles per hour and a wind gust of 47 miles per hour were recently reported. Current position there, 28.3 north, 78.9 west.
All right.
And at this point, I think we're going to finish up our discussion here. Any final thoughts from the team?
Just got a recon pass back through the northwestern part of the eye. Cat 2 winds, 85 knots, SFMR.
Ooh, okay. Well, yeah. That was to be expected, I think.
So, 100 miles. I still think this is about 100 miles an hour, but NHC probably going with 110 miles an hour because they've been above the SFMR readings pretty much ever since the storm stalled. So that's just to probably display consistency.
We're sort of rushing off the air now because I've got to produce this next update, which will be appearing on the live stream at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, so make sure you come back for that. In the meantime, I've got to rush away and update some of these graphics on the side of the screen because they're getting quite out of date as well. So we're going to do that now and leave you with the satellite imagery of the storm in real time. The last image from this was at 1:45, so that is, well, that's 9 minutes out. That's a little bit more than what we'd like, but there is pretty recent imagery of the storm. So an update at 11 p.m. and then we're deciding what we're going to do with this stream because we've been running for over 4 days and I don't know. We know that a lot of people find the chat very valuable to speak to fellow watchers, people who are looking out for the storm along the coast of Florida. It's a good tool to connect, I should imagine. So we're keeping the stream running for the time being. And plenty of updates will occur on the Force 13 channel in the meantime and in future, if we ever do finish up this coverage for good. But for now, see you at 11 and have a good evening.